Well, guys, one of our fighters of the year, Kevin Holland, knocked out Jacare last night, then got on the mic and called out Khamzat Chimaev. We're talking about that amazing performance right now. What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So, Nick, Kevin Holland, a guy that we've been talking about since late summer, early fall, really, as being one of the, if not the fighter of the year for 2020. He is just a shining example of why, when the phone rings, you pick up and you say yes.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, he has had an outbreak year unlike anybody else. Fighter of the year, definitely. He's in the running for everybody. As far as I saw it, last night's victory and the draw in the main event kind of solidified who I think should be the fighter of the year.
And you think it should be Kevin?
Yeah. I think Davison Figueiredo, all he needed to do was win to become the fighter of the year.
Right.
And unfortunately, that didn't happen. It's kind of crazy. It's like in roulette when the ball lands on 0 or 00, nobody had that.
When you get the green, yeah.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think in a lot of ways it did kind of, and there's arguments to be made that Davison is the fighter of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, he does have a belt that Kevin Holland doesn't have. But, again, with the draw last night, you talk about that.
Missing weight.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that my fighter of the year is Kevin Holland. When you come out and you take 5 fights and you call for a 6th just to squeeze one last one in before the end of the year. And, oh, by the way, the guy that you call out is Khamzat Chimaev, a guy that seemingly has had a problem getting a dance partner because he's such a polarizing and scary figure at 170 and 185. Kevin Holland not only says that he wants to fight him, but he says, I do what he does, and I do it even better. And it's kind of hard to argue that because Kevin Holland has fought 5 times this year to Khamzat's 3, and Kevin Holland has fought much tougher opposition, especially in this last fight with Jacare, than Khamzat has fought thus far. So I'm super excited. Before we get into the potential of the Holland versus Khamzat fight, which I wasn't even thinking about last night, but now I almost have to see it now that the cat's out of the bag and Holland said he wants it. What did you think about his performance against Jacare? I was just blown away by his creativity.
Yeah, and I thought speed was going to play a big part of this fight, and it did. He was much faster than Jacare, and Jacare, once it did get to the ground, which it was inevitable it was going to happen, it was just, I didn't think it was going to happen that quickly.
Right.
I was actually very impressed with how Kevin Holland handled himself on the ground. He knew how to stay active from the bottom, stay busy, and trying to get back to the feet. But when he realized it was much tougher to get back to his feet than he had maybe realized or leading up to the fight, he was able to get very active and start to get creative with his striking from there, which is something that Jacare, I guess he's probably seen something like that in his day before, but not to that extent, not to that level of ferociousness.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you're a guy like Jacare and you're in top position, even if you're kind of in the guard position or like an open guard position, which is kind of where the fight was finished, you don't feel a whole lot of danger there. But with a guy like Kevin Holland, who's so creative and so long, he can make space and throw shots with some serious power, as he showed last night, from positions that you would feel otherwise somewhat safe. And I mean, you're never in a safe position when you're in a cage, when you're locked into a cage with another man, especially one of Jacare's caliber. But, I was not expecting the fight to finish from that position. I think it was really amazing how he said, look, and I looked up his record prior to the fight last night. He had 10 knockouts on his record to 6 submissions. So a relatively decent balance. And when we think about Kevin Holland, we think about somebody who's prolific, and you think about the knockout of Joaquin Buckley, just that 1-2 sort of just super crisp walk-off KO. That's what we know Kevin Holland for. But Kevin Holland actually is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He does have a good submission game. He's not nearly the level of, as far as jiu-jitsu accolades go, as Jacare is. But I was so surprised last night to see him throwing up triangles and going for arm bars and trying to be active from the bottom position, and not even necessarily with the understanding that he's going to submit Jacare, but just to keep things moving, keep things flowing, open up opportunities. And I think that's what Kevin Holland does really well. He finds opportunities in places where it's kind of an unconventional place to find an opportunity.
Yeah, that's for sure. And when you watch somebody like Jacare Souza, if he gets on top of you, you're in trouble for the most part. And a lot of people's game plan is, when this fight does get to the ground, hold on for dear life. Hopefully the ref will stand you up. And a lot of times if somebody's really good at jiu-jitsu, especially a pressure game, they can stay just active enough to win the rounds and, throw elbows in and bloody your face up a little bit. So when he was throwing up submissions on Jacare, it made Jacare almost look for safe places to hang out for a moment so he could solidify a dominant position, things like that. And that's where striking becomes available from the bottom, which is, it's something that it's almost like a rule that you have to learn, and you have to learn how to break it once you know it really well. Like, no jiu-jitsu instructor is going to be like, okay, if this guy takes you to the ground, worry about submitting him from the bottom or striking. Get back to your feet. Stand up, get away because you're not in a good position. But once you learn how to get up from your feet and you learn how to keep yourself safe on the bottom, then you can start to create your own style and things like that. And that's exactly what Kevin did. I think there's going to be, how like the leg locks came into MMA kind of recently, and you see everybody rolling into some leg locks and those type of 50-50 exchanges. I think people are going to start to really get active from the bottom after seeing people like Tony Ferguson try to, he's always been really good from the bottom. Anthony Pettis, Kevin Holland's now one of them. I just think it's another element of the game where people aren't going to try to stall and wait for the ref to do their work for them. I think they're going to stay active from the bottom, and that will create scrambles, which will probably help a lot of fighters get back to their feet.
Yeah, and not every time and every fighter is going to get that crazy knockout from that position, that open guard position, sort of where he hipped out, threw the punch, and then just stood up and followed it up and finished the fight. But even if that can create the space and the distance for you to get back up, if you find yourself in there with somebody like a Jacare Souza, somebody who's more accomplished and a little bit more familiar on the ground than you are, you can use those sort of techniques that are unorthodox to get yourself back to your feet. Now, Kevin Holland used it last night to finish the fight. I think that he is really going to be a fighter to watch leading into 2021. Like I said, he's my fighter of the year for 2020. He's now called out Khamzat. He's talking trash with Israel Adesanya. He's doing all the right things. He's a company guy. He said in his interview, he's fun to watch. He said in his interviews last night, I'm a company guy. I'm here to do whatever the boss wants me to do. If he wants me to fight Khamzat next weekend and save the main event for December 19th, I'll do it. If they want me to wait 2 months, heal up and fight in February, I'll do that. I believe I have the skill to beat Khamzat. I believe I have the skill to beat Adesanya. So he's a breath of fresh air. And I think Dana is very happy that he changed his mind and gave him that second opportunity after he didn't like what he saw in the Contender Series.
Yeah, I mean, having a big mouth can pay off sometimes and sometimes it can't. But, when nobody's taking the fights that, you're offering them, then you got to go to whoever's left. And Kevin Holland was left. And it seems like really he's risen to the occasion, and Dana couldn't be happier to have him on the roster. He's clearly keeping him very active. And, everybody was talking about and raving, as they should, about Khamzat Chimaev's 10-day turnaround on a fight on Fight Island. And if Kevin can do this and fight next weekend, he'll break that record. Right. Which if he can get 6 fights in, 6 victories, and by the way, break the record for the quickest turnaround, which was just set by Khamzat Chimaev, his opponent that he wants to fight a couple months ago, then yeah, we for sure have Fighter of the Year. There's no denying it. With Davis and Figueroa, he was kind of the only other number one candidate, because it's not for lack of trying by a lot of people, but the COVID happening, fights falling out, people not being able to leave their countries or get to the countries where the fights are happening, that kind of played into a short list of Fighters of the Year. Yep. Kevin Holland was able to stay active. I won't say COVID-free because he did have the coronavirus not too long ago, but he was able to beat it and then, make a quick turnaround. And I think if we can save this card, not that it needs any more saving, but if the shock value of him stepping in on 7 days' notice to fight Khamzat Chimaev, a guy who is always down to step in on short notice, is something that's really cool. I think the promoters, and not even just the promoters, but like ESPN and the rest of these people can really run with that story and build up some hype for it. You've got two guys, and that's the one thing we love about MMA is two guys that are clearly on the rise. Kevin Holland is as hot of a star right now as the UFC's seen in a while. Khamzat Chimaev, of course, is probably the next hottest star.
Right.
They're 1A and 1B. And if we throw them into each other right at the beginning, we're going to have a very fun night of fights. And, in boxing, they would keep these guys as far away from each other as humanly possible.
Yep.
But in MMA, we're looking at a quick turnaround. Give us fight of the night. Give us two guys that are candidates for fighter of the year, and let's see what happens early.
And the reality is, if you put those two in there together, it's a win-win situation. Nobody's stock is going to go down. If Kevin Holland turns around after five wins this year on 1 week's notice, and then he loses, worst case scenario, Khamzat knocks him out, he's still 5-1 for the year in 2020, and he lost to the guy who's the hottest ticket in the UFC right now. If Khamzat loses, well, you lost to a guy who's a top prospect at 185 who just beat a legend, Jacare, who, oh, by the way, his last fight was at 205, and it was a split decision loss against the now champion Jan Blachowicz. So it's really, truly a win-win for both men. I would love to see it. I don't personally know where Khamzat is right now. I know there was talks of him going out to Fight Island and being there in January, presumably for the 3 weeks that's going to go on. I don't know currently if he's in the United States, if this is feasible to make happen.
I think he's in Sweden.
Yeah, but I guarantee you that the phone calls are being made right now, and if it can happen, we might just see it. And then I would go back to what I said in a couple of videos ago, which is that this card would be the best free card of all time.
Without a doubt. And Kevin Holland, it's so funny when you talk about Khamzat Chimaev because everybody was hesitant to answer the phone when they were calling, hey, you want to fight Khamzat Chimaev? Leon Edwards takes the fight because he's number 3 guy in the world. He's not afraid to fight an unranked opponent or a number 15 now, and a guy who's only had 3 fights in the UFC. So as soon as that fight got booked and they wrote their signatures down on the bottom of the contract, then everybody spoke up. Oh, I'll fight Khamzat Chimaev, knowing that he already had a fight booked. And then when that fight fell through because of the coronavirus situation that Leon was dealing with, then everybody was like, okay, it seems like they might be looking for another opponent for Khamzat Chimaev, short notice, and then it was crickets again.
Yep.
But after last night, you hear Kevin Holland, there's sincerity in his voice when he says that he's willing to fight Khamzat Chimaev. He's not afraid of Khamzat Chimaev. He knows that he's a talented fighter, and it will probably be a tough fight, but he's much bigger than Khamzat Chimaev, and he's one of those guys that – he's 6'4", so he's really big for 170, but he could probably make 170 pretty easily. Definitely make 185. So they're kind of in a weird situation where they're sitting in between two divisions, and might both be able to bounce back and forth between the two. I think Kevin Holland is the fight to make, and obviously the quick turnaround thing is something that I'm very happy with. The thing about fighting is, most guys are offered 3 fights a year. I guess that's
what Dana said. That's what he's contractually obligated to offer them.
Yeah, and luckily for the fighters, which is great for if you're somebody trying to feed your family, they'll give you more fights, but they're going to offer you 3 every year. They have to, and that's not really a good formula for keeping somebody in the headlines. Every 4 months you're fighting and people forget about you, but
many news cycles in between.
Right. It's very hard for people to remember you. But if you can take somebody like Khamzat Chimaev, the 10 days difference, he was just in the news cycle every day. And then 60 days later, he's back in the news cycle. He stays fresh on people's minds. Then he becomes a household name for the MMA fans and everybody out. I think they should do the same thing with Kevin Holland. And if we can keep these guys in the news cycle and keep them fresh on everybody's mind, you're going to be able to build stars a lot quicker in the UFC.
There's a thing in sales. I think it's called the rule of 7 or something like that. What basically it is that a consumer needs to see a product or hear about a product or see an advertisement for a product 7 times before it registers in their mind that they should buy it. So if you think about that and you take that across what we're seeing in the UFC right now, that's kind of, we talked about the Contender Series and how that's fast tracking guys who have, 3, 4, 5 wins into the UFC. What you're seeing is this new model, which has worked tremendously well for Holland, and it's worked tremendously well for Chimaev this year, which is you get him in front of you, say, this guy's the amazing Russian fighter, fights out of Sweden, spars with Alexander Gustafsson, the whole 9 yards. He's Khabib with better boxing. Boom, you hear about him. Then you see him fight. He dominates. That's the second time you hear about him. Then he's in the news cycle all that week. Then he fights the week after that. Then he's in the news cycle after that. Then he takes another fight. And boom, you've got 7 or 8 different pieces of content, pieces of information, news articles that have come out around this guy in the last span of 30 days, 60 days, and he's a name that you're not going to forget now.
Right.
But if you see a guy, and how many times have we done this? We see a guy who just has an absolutely stellar performance, but he's on the early prelims or the undercard, and it's his first, second fight in the UFC. We don't even really know who he is yet. We get hot. Man, that was an incredible performance. We get hot on him, and then he doesn't fight again for 6 months later. And we're like, oh, that's that guy. What's his name again? Because there's just so many people, and there's so much news, and there's more organizations than just the UFC, and we watch them all. But if you get somebody and you get their name in your face, boom, 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 just like that in a short span of time, that's how you really build name and brand recognition. And I think that the perfect examples of that this year are those two, Khamzat and Holland.
Yeah, they're definitely somebody that young fighters should take a lot of notes on and take example of, because what they're doing is something that Dana White didn't know he wanted, but he loves.
Yeah.
Dana was never one of the guys that was going to turn people around and bounce them between weight classes. But 2020 and, I guess even 2019,
with a limited roster, because in the United States, like when you do it at the Apex, there's only a certain number of people that you can call.
Right.
And they've got to be in the States. There's protocols because of the whole logistical nightmare that is COVID-19. So it makes for these quick turnarounds. And I'll even add to that Davison. Figueiredo, how about, he turned it around fast, and now he was a champion and a dominant champion, but relatively unknown to the casuals. The casuals aren't rushing home to hit buy on pay-per-view for Davison. But after last night's fight and the quick turnaround, and you have the story there, I think that you're going to see his pay-per-view numbers go up for his next fight.
Yeah, and he definitely earned some well-deserved rest after that fight. That was a war that him and Brandon Moreno went through. After fighting 2 times in 14 days or whatever, or 21 days, whatever it was, they deserve at least a couple of months, and then we can ask for another rematch at the flyweight division.
No question. But yeah, wrapping it up on Holland, do you think this Khamzat fight happens next, or do you think they make something else for him?
It's too hard to tell. I don't know what Dana's thinking. Obviously, the thoughts going through his mind, he's probably thinking it would be really cool to save this fight. Probably got to send a private jet to Sweden to pick up Khamzat because the traveling logistics and stuff. But I think if Khamzat's willing to do it, which I'm pretty sure he is, Kevin's clearly willing to do it. We might end up seeing it happen, and that would be very, very cool for the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think also if we don't see that happen, we'll see one or both of those guys on the Conor McGregor card.
Yeah.
Because more eyes will be on that than ever, than any other fight card, the UFC can possibly put on. And they want to get some eyes on these fresh new prospects.
Yeah. And I'll just say a lot of people will probably have the opinion that Khamzat's going to take him down. And they're probably not wrong in that opinion. But just remember that he just knocked out the multi-time over Brazilian jiu-jitsu world champion Jacare Souza from the guard. So even if he ends up on his back, it's not a foregone conclusion that Khamzat can finish the fight from there. So that's a very, very interesting fight to me.
No, I'd venture to say the Vegas odds will be very close, neck and neck. It's a pick'em fight between those two, especially after Holland's last performance.
Yeah, and it suits that it's 180. It would be at 185 because Khamzat can make 185 on short notice, and Holland just weighed 185 less than 48 hours ago. So.
Yeah, it's a perfect match.
Yeah. Guys, let us know. Are you as charged up about Kevin Holland as we are, and do you want to see the Khamzat Chimaev fight? I know we certainly do. Thanks again for watching. As always, please like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and check us out on audio where you listen to podcasts. Until next time, guys, have a great day.